Historians and investigators have the unenviable task of trying to solve some of the strangest mysteries that ever occurred. It's understandable then that hundreds of these cases remain cold, either due to a lack of evidence or because they happened so long ago that most of the people involved are no longer alive or can no longer be located. Bruce Jenner, the former Olympian, who's now known as Caitlyn Jenner, was known for his role on the hit reality TV show Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which ran for a total of 20 seasons starting in 2007. As a boy, Bruce enjoyed many different sports, such as football, water skiing, basketball, and track events. He attended Graceland College in Iowa, where he played football, but he abandoned that sport due to a knee injury. He then started competing in decathlons, and in 1972 was named as a member of the Olympic team that was set to compete in Munich. He finished 10th overall, but started training even harder for the next Olympics, and by 1976 he was regarded as one of the US's best athletes. He'd already broken the decathlon world record, and at the Olympics that were held in Montreal that year, he set personal records in the 100-meter dash, long jump, 400-meter dash, high jump, and shot put events. During the decathlon event, he set yet another world record, and after his triumphant return home, he decided to retire. He would later state that this was the plan all along, and that if he hadn't succeeded at the Olympics, he would have stopped competing regardless. He then became a television commentator, and years later, in 1991, married Kristen Houghton, better known as Kris Jenner, the mother of the Kardashians. He then only became more famous while appearing on the family's reality TV show. But in 2015, he shocked the world by announcing that he now identified as a woman, and that he'd be changing his name to Caitlyn following a series of transitioning surgeries. She left the show in 2017. Before this, Jenner appeared on the show The Balancing Act, during which she spoke about her Olympic success and her role in the Kardashian family. She also discussed the techniques she used to remain calm during times of chaos and to keep mentally fit. Shortly after this interview, though, tragedy struck while Jenner was driving her black Cadillac on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu. She was traveling northbound while towing a four-wheel off-road vehicle when the car in front of hers, a Lexus sedan, struck a Toyota Prius from behind. Jenner was unable to stop in time and rear-ended the Lexus, causing it to travel into oncoming traffic where it was struck by another vehicle. The woman who was driving the Lexus passed away at the scene, and a further 7 people had to be hospitalized. The resulting investigation found no alcohol in Jenner's system, and she cooperated with the police. Her cell phone was seized and examined to determine whether she was using it when the accident occurred, and it was revealed that she wasn't. While it was determined that the accident was just that, an accident, the deceased driver's stepchildren filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Jenner, as they felt the reality TV star was to blame after all. They claimed she'd been driving recklessly, and that they needed to be compensated for the tragic loss they'd gone through. Jenner's lawyers fired back and denied these claims, adding that the two claimants, who were aged 57 and 60 respectively, were not financially dependent on their stepmother. In 2018, Caitlyn decided to settle the matter outside of court and paid a total of $800,000 in compensation, though most people believe she was in no way responsible for the accident, and she was cleared of any criminal wrongdoing. Is a museum with an extensive collection of artifacts that gives us an insight into our collective past. The Manchester Museum is host to a widespread display of works from natural history, anthropology, and archaeology. In the anthropology section, we find a collection of 16,000 artifacts, half of which come from Africa, while a quarter of the collection is Oceania, and the rest comes from Asia and the Americas. The archaeology collection sees a treasury of artifacts from Europe, Western Asia, and Egypt. It would be the Egyptian section that this mystery has called home. Locked up securely behind display glass are several artifacts that have come from ancient Egypt and serve as a testament to a bygone era. The items were removed from the dust and transported across the world, away from their origins, for visitors to see. It's perhaps this very aspect that has bestowed a curse upon the museum. Time and time again, we're confronted with the curse of the pharaoh through the disturbance of tombs and the removal of important artifacts. One particular artifact that seems to be a vessel for this curse is the statue of Neb-Senu, a 25-centimeter tall depiction of a man wearing a headdress and a kilt. It's believed that this individual acted as a priest during his time. An inscription on his back appears to request bread, beer, and beef for his spirit. Allegedly, the Neb-Senu statue was meant as an offering to Osiris, the Egyptian god of the underworld, making it less shocking that it would be potentially haunted. The creepy mystery in this case began when staff members started to notice that the 4,000-year-old statue appeared to be turning around in the cabinet. Initially, they didn't suspect anything paranormal and thought it was an overlooked error by cleaners or maybe curators. But when Neb-Senu continued to be found facing in the opposite direction, the staff knew that it called for further investigation. In an effort to determine the cause of this unusual incident, a security camera was installed alongside the display to capture the individual responsible for rotating the figurine. But instead, they found something truly alarming. There was no person behind the act. No one had been tampering with the collected artifacts. It was doing it all on its own. The footage revealed how the statue would slowly turn around from its position all on its own throughout the course of the day, before finally ending it facing the total opposite direction until someone corrected it. The footage itself left the staff perplexed and in desperate need of answers. How was the Neb-Senu statue able to move all on its own, locked behind a display cabinet? Allegedly, experts have weighed in on this strange event, claiming that car traffic from outside and the footsteps of visitors may be causing the right amount of vibration to rotate the figure. But this doesn't explain why none of the other artifacts placed alongside Neb-Senu are staying perfectly still. Despite the potential explanation, observers still remain baffled by how something as simple as a vibration can cause an ancient relic to spin all the way around without being touched. The statue was made a vessel to obtain the soul of an ancient Egyptian man, and perhaps his spirit is still in there, and he's trying to signal his want for bread, beer, or beef, the demand that's been left inscribed on his back. Alternative explanations for this creepy mystery have ranged from mystical to magical. Some speak of ancient myths, cryptic curses, or possession. Despite the scientific explanation, a shadow still falls upon this particular artifact and its unprovoked movement, leaving behind another feature that acts as a test towards the understanding of our reality. When we think of outlaws in the Wild West, most of us picture rugged men on horseback who used to terrorize small towns during the later 1800s. But this was not always the case. One woman named Belle Starr made a name for herself as a feared outlaw who was seen in the company of Frank and Jesse James, two of the most notorious outlaws who ever lived in the West. Belle's full name was Myra Maybelle Starr, and she was born in Carthage, Missouri in 1848. She married twice in her life, first to Jim Reed and then to Sam Starr. But her last marriage ended in 1886, 3 years before she lost her life under strange circumstances that have never been explained. As an adult, she was often seen in the company of criminals, such as her first husband, who had to evade the law on several occasions. It's assumed that she helped him carry out several crimes before he lost his life in 1874, but this has never been proven. In fact, it's been suggested that she wanted a normal, quiet life since she moved back to her family's farm and divorced Reed shortly before his demise. She married Starr, the leader of a gang, in 1880, and since he was part Cherokee, they lived on tribal land, where they often hid famous outlaws like the James brothers from the law. The couple spent some time in prison after they were caught stealing horses, and Belle gained a reputation as an outlaw. She was known to carry 2 firearms at all times, but some people believe this to be an embellishment. After her second husband lost his life, she remained on tribal land and is said to have turned over a new leaf, as she no longer harbored outlaws and refused to defend their crimes. Then, on the 3rd of February, 1889, Belle was found deceased in Briartown, Oklahoma. It was revealed that she was on a trip to Fort Smith and that she changed her plans at the last minute for unknown reasons. During the investigation, it was found she had many enemies, including her 2 children, Eddie and Pearl. A man named Edgar Watson was named as a prime suspect since he'd hired a strip of land from Belle. And when she found out that he was a wanted outlaw who'd ended someone's life, he was evicted, leaving him destitute. But there was no way of proving that he had ended her life since there were no witnesses and no clues as to the identity of Belle's attacker, and he was acquitted. Following this, nothing further could be done, and the case was never solved, making it one of the oldest unsolved crimes in Oklahoma's history. In this video that was uploaded to YouTube in 2021, the artist Bob Kane is seen visiting the set of the 1989 film Batman, which is hardly surprising since he's credited with creating the famous superhero. It all started after the creation of Superman in 1938. When that character proved to be a massive success, DC Comics was looking for the next big superhero, and Kane was invited to meet with director Vince Sullivan to discuss the available options. Kane invited a friend of his, Bill Finger, to attend the meeting, and they worked on a few ideas together. When the first Batman comics were printed, though, Finger's name was nowhere to be seen in the written credits, despite his scripts being used. He was not even asked to contribute to the artwork, as Kane decided to use uncredited artists instead. In 1946, Kane declared that he was the sole creator of Batman, and he entered into a deal with DC Comics. The Batman TV series launched in 1966, and while Finger worked on one episode, Kane became a very wealthy man, while his friend received very little compensation. But Batman fans would soon learn the truth of the matter when Finger appeared at a comic book convention in New York, and when a comic book historian called Jerry Bales wrote an article entitled "If the Truth Be Known," or "A Finger in Every Plot." But Kane fired back by contacting a fan magazine stating, "I, Bob Kane, am the sole creator of Batman." It should be noted that Finger never made much of a fuss about the matter, and he passed away in 1974, still uncredited for his part of the creation. Kane would claim in his autobiography that he'd used 3 sources as inspiration in his creation of Batman. These were a Leonardo da Vinci sketch of a flying machine, the film The Mark of Zorro, and the 1930 film The Bat Whispers. Today, most comic book aficionados credit Finger as the true creator of Batman, as they feel Kane merely used the ideas of others to further Finger's vision, and then claimed it to be his own. DC has also since credited Finger as the character's co-creator since 2015. Following several different scenarios that left residents on edge, questioning the very fabric of their reality. For centuries, the disembodied voices, unexplained sensations, and the sights of ghostly apparitions have haunted us. With the emergence of the camera, we discovered that such events could be captured right on camera and serve as evidence of the paranormal. Sometimes, though, we may get more than we bargained for. Such was the case in one restaurant in Cascade, Iowa, which was left frightened by a particularly unnerving event. It was in Chuck and Edna's Made Right restaurant that the idea of suspected paranormal activity emerged. In 2014, Pat Orr, the restaurant owner, was reviewing some CCTV footage when he saw something strange. Hovering above the sink is a shadowy figure that shifts slightly to take the form of a person before quickly drifting off screen. Perplexed by what he had seen, Pat made contact with paranormal investigator Christopher O'Brien, who began to gather more evidence and information. Staff would go on to claim that they've experienced some inexplicable events in the restaurant that left them feeling creeped out and wanting to leave. Even more telling, Pat's young niece refuses to enter the establishment. The amorphous shadow wasn't the only strange thing that the cameras were able to capture either. Mere weeks after Pat made contact with the investigator, something even more distressing took place. An employee going about her routine, standing near the shelves that were stacked with dishes, mugs, and cookware, when suddenly a whole stack of styrofoam cups flew off the shelf and tumbled onto her. Skeptics initially discredit the video of the shadowy figure as being a bug, creating a disturbance on the lens, but the figure's size and distinct form lead some to believe otherwise. Ghost hunters and paranormal investigators seem to have everything they need to conclude whether or not this is truly a haunting. Unfortunately, their findings remain eerily confidential, leaving us to wonder what's behind the ongoing events there. Much has been said about the passing of Orville Gibson, a wealthy dairy farmer who lived in Newbury, Vermont, since he's said to have been disliked by most people in the area, and his case has never been solved. By the beginning of 1957, Gibson, who was known as Hoot, had gained a reputation as a rude and sometimes violent man, and in December of 1956, he was arrested after he was accused of assaulting Ari Martin, one of his hired hands, who was an elderly man. But before he could face the charges in court, he suddenly disappeared in the early morning hours of the 1st of January, 1956. His absence was no great loss to the surrounding community, but an investigation still had to be carried out, and for 3 months, 2 state troopers, William Graham and Lawrence Washburn, who were handed the case, were left baffled as they could find no sign of him or any clues to indicate what might have happened to him. It was known that he'd walked out to his barn that morning at around 4 a.m., and he was about to milk 2 of his cows, and to do so, he had to cross the state highway that lay between his farm and the barn. It's also certain that he didn't merely leave the area of his own free will, since he would never dream of leaving his farm unattended. In April of that year, some answers were finally found when Gibson's body was discovered in the Connecticut River. Gibson's wife, Evelyn, was questioned, and she recounted the events of that morning, stating that her husband left to milk his cows and never returned. When the barn was searched, they found scuff marks on the floor and evidence suggesting that something large, such as a body, was dragged into the yard outside the barn. It was suggested that he was beset upon by someone who assaulted him before tying him up and abducting him. The fact that Gibson had assaulted Martin, a much smaller and older man than he was, over some spilled milk had outraged the community, and it was suggested that his life was ended in a form of mob justice. Martin had suffered serious injuries as a result of the assault, and had only just survived while receiving treatment at a local hospital. Or so it was said by the locals. The truth was that he suffered a few minor bruises and was never taken to a hospital. With this type of misinformation being spread around town, the investigation was hindered, and Graham and Washburn's task was made more difficult. Later on, a unique mix of hay and cattle feed was found on a bridge at the river, and it was determined to belong to Gibson. For reasons unspecified, 2 men, Ozzie Welch and Frank Carpenter, were arrested by ending Gibson's life, but no evidence to prove their guilt was ever found, and they were eventually acquitted. It would later come to light that Martin had lied about the assault. He confessed that on the day in question, he arrived at work intoxicated and was ordered by Gibson to go home to sleep it off, but he refused and followed Gibson into the barn, cursing at him, which prompted the farmer to throw him out of the barn. He scuffed his knee, but told his wife that he'd been attacked by Gibson and that he suffered kidney damage, leading to outrage in the local community. In the weeks that followed, Gibson received several threats on his life via postcard, and at one point several cars were seen parked outside of his house. He disappeared 7 hours later, and his life was ended, leaving us with a mystery that'll likely never be solved. Most of us are familiar with popular TV shows like This Is Your Life, which was last broadcast in 2003, with a one-off episode that was broadcast in 2007 being the exception. The premise of the show was to invite celebrities onto the stage, after which they relived certain moments in their careers and met up with people who helped shape them into the people that they'd become. The episodes were often very emotional for actors, singers, artists, and the like, as they recounted memories from their pasts and reconnected with friends and family members that they hadn't seen for decades in some cases. The first episode aired in 1952, with Laura Stone Marr, the mother of the actor Milburn Stone, being the first ever guest. After its first airing, the show quickly gained popularity, and it was watched by millions of people around the world. But one particular episode struck viewers as especially interesting, thanks to the events that preceded it. It featured the actress Frances Farmer, who hailed from Seattle. She showed acting talent from a young age, and while attending the University of Washington, she started studying drama. She soon started appearing in plays, and it was clear she was embarking on a successful career as an actress. To attain the funds needed to move to Hollywood, she started selling subscriptions to a leftist magazine called The Voice of Action, and she won a round-trip ticket to New York and Moscow, Russia. Her mother claimed that Frances had been corrupted by radicals and that Frances faced a lot of backlash from civil leaders. The Young Men's Christian Association of Seattle and other prominent associations, with her mother being her biggest detractor. She denied claims that she was a communist, stating that she merely wanted to travel to Russia to study theater and that she wanted to settle in New York. Once she made it there, she started looking for acting work and landed a contract with Paramount Pictures. She started making a name for herself in the industry after appearing in 4 movies, and at least one director named her as the best actress he'd ever worked with. But she soon grew tired of Hollywood, describing it as a nut house, and she became difficult to work with. She decided to turn to theater once more, and she garnered great praise for her performances. When a love affair ended badly, though, she started drinking heavily and was fired by the theater company that she had joined. When the next 2 plays that she appeared in failed miserably, she became emotionally exhausted and decided to return to Hollywood. She appeared in 2 more small films, but no longer had the passion for acting that she had before, and retreated to a life of solitude. She'd also started using an appetite suppressant, which is illegal today because it's highly addictive. And on the 19th of October 1942, she was pulled over by a police officer in Santa Monica for having her car's bright headlights on in a wartime dim-out zone. She was charged with driving while intoxicated, driving without a license, and failure to obey dim-out restrictions. She had to pay a fine of $250,000 and was handed a suspended jail sentence. But upon arriving home, she found that her family had moved her belongings into a hotel in Hollywood since she could no longer afford to live in the bungalow that she'd been renting. When she assaulted a hairdresser on the set of a low-budget film, she was arrested again. She was sentenced to 180 days in jail and had to be removed from the courtroom after assaulting 2 police officers. While she was being carried out, she was heard yelling, "Have you ever had a broken heart?" She was assessed by a psychiatrist who ordered her transfer to Los Angeles General Hospital's psychiatric ward, and she was taken to the La Crescenta Sanatorium. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia, paranoia, and manic depression, and would remain there for 7 years. She underwent insulin shock therapy, which took a serious toll on her, and her mother arranged for her release, but Frances was understandably never the same again. Her mother had her declared insane, and after being committed again, she underwent more shock therapy. She was released and committed again later on, and lived through the worst time in her life. She attempted a comeback years later, but was unsuccessful. The episode of This Is Your Life shows Frances after she'd suffered through this ordeal, and by her demeanor, it's clear she never fully recovered, and she seems demure and shy, a far cry from the starlet who once lit up Hollywood billboards with her remarkable performances. Lewis Carroll, whose real name is Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, is best remembered as the author of 2 of the most famous books of all time, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, which served as a sequel. But it's known that he kept several diaries over the years, and it's believed that he authored at least 13 volumes. But today, historians are desperate to find out what happened to 4 of those diaries that have inexplicably disappeared, and a few theories have been suggested. Carroll's nephew, who served as his biographer, stated that Carroll kept diaries from a young age, and it's believed that he wrote the first at age 10. The diaries that we know of today were written from 1855, just before he turned 23 years old, and they contain a mix of subjects. He wrote about famous people that he was lucky enough to meet, the classes that he attended while at Oxford University, experiments in photography that he conducted, and the lectures that he delivered after he retired. He kept these diaries in his possessions at all times, but when he passed away in January of 1898, they were inherited by his remaining family members, since he never had any children nor did he marry. It's been suggested that they didn't like everything they read in those diaries, since they felt that Carroll should be remembered as a virtuous and pious person who became an author so that he could bring joy to children. But the contents of the diaries may have shocked them, as they revealed his true nature. In reality, he was a very outgoing man who enjoyed spending time with women. They believed him to be reclusive, but upon reading his diaries, they learned that he was an amateur inventor who spent time with other famous actors such as Mark Twain, and who spent a lot of time outdoors since he loved going on long walks. They ordered his nephew to write a biography that painted him as a shy and inhibited man, and only certain sections of his diaries were included to create the illusion that he only cared about writing children's books. Then, in 1932, it came to light that 4 of the diaries had disappeared, and his family claimed that they'd been misplaced while they were moving into a new house. They decided to donate the rest of the diaries to the British Library in 1969, but staff at the library immediately noticed that 10 pages were missing. It's known that 2 of those pages were torn out by Carroll, but the other 8 were removed by his family for reasons unknown. One particular missing page contained the reason for Carroll and Alice Liddell's family, the girl who served as inspiration for his famous book, becoming enraged. It's been suggested that Carroll proposed marriage to Alice and that the family was outraged when they found out about this, but this has never been proven. All that's known about this chapter in his life is that he started spending less time with the family and eventually kept his distance altogether. The evening hours are home to the strange and the obscure. The entities that lurk there are the things from nightmares that are bound to leave fear in those who encounter them, whether it's ghosts, creatures of folklore, or extraterrestrial visitors. The dark is no friendly place. 2021 seemed to be the year of strange encounters, specifically those of alien origin. Several reports of UFOs were documented, along with bizarre sightings of humanoid creatures lurking in the darkness. One such strange occurrence made it on camera and sent shockwaves throughout the community of India's Jharkhand state. It was the 27th of May when the dashcam footage first emerged on social media, revealing something truly bizarre lurking on the streets of the Hazarabad district. In the video, jutting out from the darkness is a pale figure seen by several passers-by. The being was said to be a strange-looking woman who had alien-like features and was believed to be carrying an evil force with her. It was amid heavy rains that the woman was walking slowly, as if in a trance, across a bridge that had recently been built near the Charwa Dam by the Katkamsandi police station. Though initially thought to be a random person walking in the pouring rain, several witnesses claimed that the being was much taller and thinner than the average person. Her mannerisms were peculiar, and her atmosphere exuded an unapproachable nature, leaving those who encountered her fearful. The individuals who can be heard in the video even suggested that she may be a witch or a supernatural creature of sorts. The group, most of whom were on motorcycles, traveled this route often and had never come across something like this in the past. They made sure not to approach the woman, who seemed surprisingly undeterred by their presence. When the video began to circulate through several online platforms, the police were left with no other option but to investigate this terrifying ordeal. Despite the footage and several witnesses, though, the police couldn't find anything unusual in the area. They managed to find the person who recorded the video, who preferred to remain anonymous, and could offer no answers as to what they had witnessed before them. The investigators also waited for other independent inquiries or reports of this incident, but none were received. Law enforcement began to believe that this was some sort of hoax, suggesting that it was all computer-generated, a theory that many are not taking well to. No official conclusion has been reached regarding this unusual event, leaving the Jharkhand roadside visitor with an intriguing yet spine-chilling mystery. In 1866, a strange case unfolded in Dos Palmas, which is located close to Palm Springs, California, and it remains unsolved today. It involves a man named Herman Ehrenberg, who was well known in the area at the time, making his case all the more baffling. On the 10th of October that year, Herman lost his life close to a relay station in the area. He was lying deceased across a wooden pallet, and when the police investigated, it was discovered that he was the victim of a homicide, since he'd been attacked with a firearm. Herman was an accomplished miner and surveyor who'd relocated to the US from then Prussia, which is now known as Russia, many years earlier. He'd fought in the Texas Revolution and miraculously made it out of the Goliad massacre alive. It's known that he traveled to San Bernardino from Yuma just before his life was ended, and that he'd been sleeping on the pallet where he was found, having arrived at the station on the 9th of October. A few people had learned he was planning on buying a mine in the area, and that he was carrying about $3,500 on his person, which would have likely made him a target for robbers since this was a massive amount of money at the time. The next day, the station master, a man named W.H. Smith, reported that he was asleep that night and that he woke with a start after someone discharged a firearm at around midnight. He went outside to investigate, and that's when he found Herman gravely injured. He called for aid, but by the time it arrived, it was too late. He also noted that some items had been stolen from a small storeroom close by, and it was suspected that it was the work of members of the Cahuilla tribe. Speculation had it that they were in the process of robbing the storeroom, and that Herman surprised them when he went to investigate. But there was no supporting evidence of this, and a few months later, another theory emerged. It was said that the true culprit was seen by members of the tribe, and that they tracked him to Agua Caliente, which is now Palm Springs, where they ended his life. This was not the last theory that would be suggested, though. One of Herman's friends, Charles Preston, accused Smith of the crime, but he only believed this due to the fact that Smith was present at the time, and because he would have had a lot of time to commit the act and steal Herman's cash. No one was ever named a suspect, and it would only be 8 decades later that another theory was put forward. Bill McCoy revealed that he had traveled to the area with Herman and 2 other men, and they decided to rest at Mule Springs, where something strange happened. One of the other 2 men expressed his interest in a woman living in the area, and upon hearing about this, a friend of hers challenged the man to a fight. After he lost the fight, her friend followed the group to San Bernardino, where he ended Herman's life, mistakenly believing he was the man he'd fought with. But again, no proof of this was ever found, and the true events of that night have never been determined. It all started in December of 2004. Northern Ireland's most traumatizing ordeal that left many speechless and in search of answers they would never get. Up until that point, the year had been typical in Belfast, whose residents now found themselves preparing for the festivities. It would be this very year that they finally felt as though they'd gotten Belfast's center back, following the worst campaigns of security gates and body searches. That's why when residents woke up to some shocking news, they were left concerned and in a state of panic. On the morning of the 21st of December, news stations blared with the story of a robbery, but it wasn't just any robbery. It was the largest heist that Northern Ireland had ever seen. A gang had made their way into the Northern Bank, right next to the City Hall, and they were able to make off with an astounding £26.5 million, right in front of Christmas shoppers. It all began with a simple knock on the doors of the Northern Bank employees. On the other side were men pretending to be there for innocent business, when they really had come to take their families hostage, forcing the bank employees to do as they were told. They were instructed to go to work as normal, and during the entirety of the shift, each employee had to work together to remove sums of cash little by little from the bank vaults. Should they fail, their families would pay the price. A test run initiated the ordeal, with one staff member delivering £1 million in a hold-all bag. No alarms were sounded, and so the real robbery could commence. Through several tips to the vault and carrying bags loaded with cash from the bank into the getaway van waiting in the narrow street, the gang was able to secure more than £20 million, and it all happened right under everyone's noses. Undoubtedly, this was the act of heist that was planned by highly skilled and knowledgeable people. The following morning, when word of the missing money began to circulate, the police began an extensive investigation, which included sifting through hours of CCTV footage in an effort to figure out where that money had gone. Right before their eyes, it all played out. On the security footage, one of the employees could be seen making away with a bag stuffed with cash, fear for his family coursing through his mind. The footage allowed police to figure out which employees were being forced to act on behalf of the organized crime group. Interviews and investigations told the traumatizing story of abductions, threats, and hostages. What it failed to divulge, though, was who the men behind this heist truly were. The only other clue that ever surfaced in this mystery was another piece of CCTV footage. The investigators released only stills from the footage, one that captured the getaway van on camera. It was making its way through traffic, calmly drawing no attention, and acting far from suspicious. No one would have expected what was lurking within this simple vehicle. Despite the use of 45 detectives, over a dozen other staff members, and tips from the public, the massive investigations went nowhere. Experts couldn't determine who was behind the world's largest cash robbery, leaving the community shattered and families traumatized by this harrowing ordeal. The case involving 45-year-old cabinet maker Ryan Borgward is one that's left a lot of people angry and confused due to the strange decisions that he made in August of 2012, and he'll have to live with those decisions for the rest of his life. The case has now been resolved, but a timeline of the strange events that occurred during the investigation has been published, and it makes for some disturbing reading. At the time of his disappearance, in August of 2024, Ryan was living in Wisconsin with his wife and children, and he made plans to go on a fishing trip. He set out to Green Lake, but never returned, and his family feared that he may have had an accident while out on the water in his kayak. A search of the lake was subsequently organized, and it lasted for a full 50 days. The kayak was found, as was Ryan's phone and ID, and it was assumed he ended up in the water somehow and was unable to make it back to shore before drowning. But the resulting investigation revealed a few troubling details that would eventually lead to this very strange case being solved. It was discovered that he'd applied for a second passport, and that after he received it, he kept it a secret from his wife and children. On the day that he set out for the lake, he removed the hard drive from his laptop and replaced it with a brand new one. This made it impossible to track his online activity, bank transactions, and emails. His browser history had been erased on all of his devices, and he'd contacted several banks to get information about transferring money to banks in foreign countries. Next, he bought several airline gift cards, which he likely used himself, and it started to seem as though he'd been planning to leave the country. 6 months before setting out on his fishing trip, he took out a large life insurance policy to the tune of $375,000, and he named his wife as the sole beneficiary. Investigators started to speculate that Ryan was in financial trouble, and that he was committing some type of fraud, or that he'd gotten into trouble somehow and erased all his digital data before making his getaway. It would then come to light that Ryan had capsized his kayak on purpose before getting onto a bus to Canada. But his destination was the country of Georgia, where he met up with a woman from Ukraine named Katya, whom he'd been secretly dating online. Investigators managed to contact him via email, and Ryan then created a video to prove that he was still alive. He spoke directly to the camera and showed a small section of his new apartment, adding that he was safe and secure. Investigators convinced him to return to Wisconsin, and once he did, he was arrested. He would admit that he was in financial trouble since he was in $205,000 of debt, and he felt like a failure. He was charged with obstruction of justice and sentenced to 89 days in jail. Once that was done, he returned to Katya, stating that the cost of living was far cheaper in Georgia, and it's believed that he's now started that new life that he was looking for. The artist Richard Prince, who's known for his paintings and photography, was born in the Panama Canal Zone in 1949, but he spent most of his childhood in Massachusetts before he relocated to New York in 1977. Once there, he landed a position with Time Life, a multimedia company that provided direct marketing tools for books, videos, and music. While there, Richard started becoming interested in advertising, and he started using pop culture images that he found in magazines as inspiration for some of his work. He held his first solo exhibition in 1980, and before long he was being hailed as the father of appropriation art. But not everyone was as enthralled by his work as some critics were. While some called his work appropriation, others saw it as plagiarism and laziness, such as one series that he released called Cowboys, which included photographs of Marlboro adverts that he found in magazines. In 2001, he bought a farmhouse close to his home, and he named it Second House. He then converted it into an installation venue where his books, paintings, sculptures, and photographs were put on display. In 2013, the YouTube channel Vice posted a video of Richard in which he gave a tour of his home in the country. He also showed some of the paintings that he'd been working on and spoke of his life out of the country that afforded him some privacy when he needed it. But the following year would see Richard criticized after he put on an exhibition of his work called New Portraits at the Gagosian Gallery in New York. It was made up of images that he downloaded from his Instagram feed. These images were uploaded to the platform by other photographers, and rumors started to swirl that he was committing copyright infringement. But the rumors eventually died down until 2014, when it came to light that some of those pieces were being sold for as much as $100,000 each. Two of the photographs, whose images had been used, Donald Graham and Eric McNatt, filed a lawsuit against Richard. They pointed out that these images clearly belonged to them, and not the appropriation artist who merely downloaded them and sold them without permission. He was eventually ordered to compensate the actual artist who'd created these images $650,000 in damages and $250,000 in legal costs. Located in both Nebraska and Florida is a business that certainly lives up to its name. It's the Museum of Shadows, voted as the most haunted museum in the world. Both locations are host to a number of haunted artifacts, each of which was donated to them from multiple countries. These items aren't just creepy in their physical appearance, but have allegedly been verified to be haunted. Visitors have reported the creepiest encounters from disembodied voices, apparitions, laughing children, and physical touch. But it's when the doors are closed that the entities really come out to play, literally. Allowing us to keep up with the creepy paranormal events are the security cameras that the business has installed, capturing several unusual moments right on film. In Plattsmouth, Nebraska, Nate Raderman, the owner of the Museum of Shadows, was reviewing footage from the previous evening, sifting through it to determine if anything ghostly had occurred. The footage came from the 2nd of February, 2018, in the very early morning hours, and what Nate witnessed certainly sent chills down his spine. Though there was a lot of strange activity here, they hadn't seen anything quite like this. In the grainy footage, overlooking one of the rooms of the building, an inflated ball can be seen getting tossed around and rolling about on the floor. It appears as though it was picked up and thrown, but there was no human present in the building at the time. According to paranormal experts, the ball is a trigger object, an item that the spectral beings can interact with. Because the item in question was a ball, and the way it was behaving, many believe that the ghost may be that of a playful child who's interacting with the toy. This could be consistent with those creepy children's laughs and giggles that visitors have claimed to have heard. The museum has, of course, been subjected to other strange events, including dolls walking, falling off shelves, or rocking in a rocking chair. Some items have even been seen to have been yanked from their spot by unseen hands. These occurrences have led several experts to warn visitors not to touch any of the items, not even that ball that seems to have a mind of its own. In fact, the Museum of Shadows has also warned its guests not to touch any of the artifacts, suggesting that spirits may latch onto them. Holy water is placed at the entrance, with staff suggesting that it should be used when going in and coming back out. Although paranormal happenings occurring in a place of supposedly haunted items isn't entirely shocking, it still serves as a creepy reminder that not everything is as it seems, and that we're sharing our physical plane with those who have passed on. Nebraska is also home to several haunted locations and is steeped in legend and myth. Paranormal activity has been reported all over the state, much of which lingers around supposedly possessed settlements that are seen as ghost hotspots. The Museum of Shadows is one such building, even without the haunted artifacts. It was once a saloon with an upstairs brothel, and was said to be a place where many lost their lives or were victims of homicide, suggesting the presence of particularly malevolent spirits who call the building home. The addition of already haunted artifacts also serves as a vessel for these spirits, allowing them to linger and unnerve those who encounter them. Inexplicable disappearances are some of the most perplexing mysteries that investigators have to deal with. And the case involving Jesus de Helindez, a Spanish lecturer at Columbia University in New York, is one such case that seems to have no solution. The mystery started on the 12th of March, 1956, when he finished giving a graduate seminar on Latin American government. He completed that seminar at around 9:30 p.m., and then got a ride from one of his students to 57th Street and 8th Avenue, where he was seen walking into the subway. Since he was single and was known to have no particular regular route, no one noticed that he'd gone missing until days later. and when he was reported as missing, the police traveled to his apartment. When it was searched, everything seemed to be in place, and there were no signs that anything untoward had taken place. Most people believe that he traveled back to the Dominican Republic, since it was known that he'd lived there for several years, but those close to him doubted this theory, since he told them that he was worried about being harmed by certain people from that country. This was due to the fact that after General Franco emerged victorious in the Spanish Civil War, Jesus relocated to Ciudad Trujillo, now known as Santo Domingo, and there he made a name for himself while working with the government's national economy and labor departments. But he soon found himself in trouble over his democratic views, and in 1946 he thought it better to flee to New York, where he started his teaching career. He wrote a dissertation called The Era of Trujillo, in which he spoke of Trujillo's abuse of power and dictatorship, which would not have impressed the government back in the Dominican Republic. After becoming aware of the dissertation, a Dominican consular officer alerted Trujillo to its existence and contents. He was offered $25,000 to hand the dissertation over to Trujillo, but Jesus declined. It then came to light that Jesus was about to present the piece to the faculty committee at the university, and this irked Trujillo to the point that he decided to end Jesus's life. A night watchman at an airfield in Amityville would later state that he saw a deceased person being loaded onto a small plane on the 12th of March, 1956, but he passed away from a suspicious heart attack a few days later. A mechanic in West Palm Beach also witnessed the event, but he also lost his life under mysterious circumstances before he could testify to the fact. Most archaeological mysteries are unearthed in remote areas, deserts, or in ancient ruins that stood untouched for centuries. But in some cases, these artifacts are in plain sight, and many people have no idea what they are or how they got there. This is the case with a landmark of London that has fascinated people for centuries. It's called the London Stone and can be found on Cannon Street, where it's been incorporated into building number 111. While it's known that this nondescript rock stood in the same spot for a very long time, historians and experts have never been able to figure out who brought it there or what its purpose was. It measures 21 by 17 by 12, and according to a study that was conducted in the 1960s, it's composed of Clipsum limestone. It's been suggested it was once part of a strip of Jurassic rock that can be found between Lincolnshire and Dorset, but others feel that it may have been brought to London from Cotswolds. It's certain that the rock was in London from as early as 1578, since it's been depicted on maps from that time. But a description from that year also states that it was much bigger, and hence we now know that the piece of rock that remains in London is only a fragment of the original. It was present during the Great Fire of London in 1666, and despite all the buildings around it being razed to the ground, it remained intact. When those buildings were then cleared, a remarkable discovery was made. Up to that point, everyone believed that the rock was just as it appeared. But when architects started rebuilding the properties that had been destroyed, they started digging around the rock and realized there was more to it than meets the eye. The visible portion of the stone was actually the smallest part, as the rest extended about 10 feet into the ground like a root. Following this, more theories were put forward, with some historians suggesting that it served as a marker from where all the roads in historic London were measured, as they all may have been built from that spot outward. Back then, the rock stood in the middle of the street, but as London became more congested, the decision was made to move it next to the wall of St. Swithin's Church. It then survived the entire Second World War intact, after which it was treated like the landmark that it was. The church was destroyed during the war, and it was replaced with an office block in 1962. The stone was incorporated into the building with a small window through which it could be viewed. This is where it remains today, but we're no closer to figuring out why the stone was brought here and what its true purpose was. As is expected, many theories have been put forward though, such as that it stood in that spot since prehistoric times. Thanks to several ancient inscriptions that have been found throughout history, we know with certainty that a city called Agade once stood, but for centuries, historians have tried and failed to figure out where it stood. It's said that the city, which is also known as Akkad, was the very beating heart of the first great empire that was ever established. It existed around 4,100 years ago and united all of Mesopotamia under a solitary king. At one point, it was nearly destroyed, but when it was rebuilt, it was named the capital of its region by Sargon the Great, the very first ruler of the Akkadian Empire. He lived between 2334 and 2279 BC and created his empire by defeating the forces of Sumerian cities in that area. It should be noted that Sargon didn't found this city, but rebuilt it after sacking it and realizing it had a massive potential as a capital. Once he defeated his enemies, Sargon created a centralized government, and the city served as a symbol of his revolutionary ideas that strayed from Sumerian traditions. Ishtar the Warlike was named as the city's goddess, along with the god Ilaba. But not everyone was as impressed by the city as its inhabitants, as on many occasions it was besieged, but with very little success. But when Sharkali Shari, the son of Naram-Sin, passed away, the city started to see some troubles, not only thanks to infighting, but also thanks to invaders from the Gushans who lived in the Zagros Mountains. During these conflicts, the Akkadian dynasty was brought to an end, but the city stood firm for many more centuries. Sometime around 1800 BC, the rulers of the city of Eshnunna traveled there during military campaigns, and it's believed that the city was still filled with citizens, traders, and visitors. It's even mentioned in the very first book of the Bible, Genesis. It's listed as one of the cities ruled by Nimrod, the great-grandson of Noah, along with Babel, Calneh, and Erech. We know that Akkad was still standing in the 7th century BC, as an Assyrian official named Mar Assar was tasked by the emperor to assume control of the city. That's when historical references of Akkad started to become less common. The last known mention of the city, still standing, is contained in an inscription made by Cyrus the Great of Persia, the conqueror of Babylon. The inscription dates from 559 BC, and it includes Akkad in a list of cities that make up his vast empire. Despite all these clues, we have no idea where the city stood all those centuries ago. Ancient texts hint that it was built close to Babylon and the Tigris and Diyala rivers, but many searches have been carried out in these areas by archaeologists over the years, but none have found any trace of Akkad. In 1930, Maurice Graham had made a name for himself as a World War I veteran, and by his time, a highly regarded airmail pilot. He was hailed by the Professional Pilots Association as a world champion male pilot after he completed more than 175,000 miles of flight on his usual route that stretched between Los Angeles and Salt Lake City. He had never arrived late, never experienced any mid-flight emergencies, and was never forced to make a forced landing. During the war, he served in France as part of the 50th Aero Squadron. He completed a series of very dangerous missions and ended up being recommended for the Distinguished Flying Cross, and became known for his uncanny ability to avoid being hit by enemy fire. He would later state that whenever he felt he needed to turn right to avoid being hit, he would turn left and vice versa. He was discharged from service in October of 1919, after which he returned to his hometown of California. He married his fiancée Alice a few days later. When airmail was privatized in 1926, Maurice was one of the first pilots to sign up for the position. He and his fellow pilots, who were tasked with flying the same route, first surveyed the route by car, placing massive canvases in the shape of the letter T along the way, so that they would never get lost, even at night, and so that they would know where to land in case of an emergency. He made his first airmail flight on the 17th of April that year, with a cargo that contained a meal of eggs and ham that was kept warm by the plane's engine. It was a gift from the Breakfast Club of Los Angeles, which sent the meal as a gift to the mayor of Salt Lake City. For the next few years, Maurice completed thousands of hours in his biplane without incident, but that changed on the 10th of January, 1930. Before he took off, another pilot warned him of bad weather along the route, but Maurice would not be dissuaded from completing his delivery. It's believed that after he took off, he circled the area for about an hour, looking for a break in the thick cloud cover, but it remains unknown whether he ever found one, as he was never seen again. Some people would report hearing a plane flying over areas away from the route that he usually took, and when he failed to arrive for his delivery in Salt Lake City, a search was organized. Tips came flowing in fast, with some people reporting they'd seen emergency flares alight somewhere close to the Sawhill Canyon, and others state that they'd seen a plane disintegrating a short distance from the Bristol mines. For the next 6 days, a massive search operation failed to find any sign of Maurice or his plane. Temperatures along his route had plummeted dramatically, and if he made an emergency landing, there was very little chance that he could have now survived against the elements. No sign of him was ever found, and despite the best efforts of his fellow pilots and hundreds of searchers, no one ever learned what happened to Maurice that day. The mystery surrounding the demise of 55-year-old Janet Rogers remains one of the oldest unsolved crimes in the history of the United Kingdom, and there's very little chance that we'll ever learn who ended her life. In March of 1866, Janet traveled from her home in Perth, Scotland, to Mount Stewart Farm, where her brother William lived. He'd contacted her, saying that his domestic servant had quit and that he needed help with the household chores. She agreed to help out and arrived at the farm, which was located a few miles south of Perth a few days later. William had inherited the farm from their father and never married or had any children, meaning that running the entire property was up to him. After arriving at the farm on the 28th of March, she took her time to get settled in and then started getting to work on the chores that needed to be done. William and his only plowman, James Crichton, were now free to tend to the cattle and fields, and on the 30th of March, William was heading out to a market in town. He and Janet had breakfast together that morning, and Crichton was given several duties to perform throughout the day. By this time, William and Crichton weren't on the best of terms, since William had accused him of stealing from him, but work was scarce and hence Crichton stayed on at the farm. At around 10:30 a.m., William set off for town on his horse, and Janet told him that she might visit a relative later on in the day, since she'd completed her chores. Crichton would state that he saw an unknown man with a dog about half an hour later, and another resident who'd seen the same man provided a description to the police. She stated that he was about 40 years old, unshaven, standing about 5 foot 8 inches tall, and that he was wearing a dark coat and cap. William, completely oblivious to all of this, arrived home at around 6:30 p.m., and to his surprise he couldn't get into the house as both doors were locked. Janet failed to answer when he knocked, and so he resorted to climbing through a window. When he walked into his kitchen, his heart dropped when he saw Janet lying on the floor, deceased. The police and a doctor were called, and it was determined that Janet had been attacked at around 3 p.m. that day, and that her attacker had ended her life with an axe. Her remains had been covered with a blanket, and the doors were locked from the inside. Investigators felt that this was an indication that the culprit either knew Janet or was remorseful over their actions. Several clues were recovered from the scene, including the axe used in the attack, a footprint that was left in the kitchen, 3 paper bags, one of which contained snuff, and strangest of all, a pipe that had been shoved under a pillow. It was believed that the pipe belonged to the attacker since neither William nor Janet smoked. The house was left in disarray as if someone was looking for something, and it was discovered that several items had been stolen. These included a $1 note, a pocketbook, a few eggs, and a pair of pants. After a $100 reward was announced for information, leading to the identification of the culprit, many leads started coming in, but none were of any use. Several people were questioned, only to be cleared of any suspicion. Some people provided spurious tips in hopes of getting reward money, which only hindered the investigation. Police noted that when they questioned William about who he thought the killer might be, he grew very irritated and red in the face. After 8 months with no progress in the case, William's former domestic servant told the police that Crichton had confessed to her that he'd committed the crime, but she wasn't taken seriously, since it was known that she lived with him for a while and had grown jealous of his wife. Others felt that she wanted her old job back and made her tale to curry favor with William, but to no avail. William accused Crichton, and he was regarded as the main suspect, but his guilt could not be proven due to a lack of evidence. 55-year-old Peter Gibb is yet another pilot who was the subject of a very strange mystery that's left experts baffled since his passing in 1975. And while some aspects of the mystery have been solved, many questions remain unanswered. At the time, Peter had become a very successful businessman, but he had a noted past as a pilot. While serving in World War II, he flew a Spitfire and became known for keeping his cool under stressful situations. He exited the war as a decorated pilot, but once he returned home to London, England, he purchased a small two-seater Cessna that he used to fly to Mull on occasion. He racked up hundreds of hours of flight time, and so when he decided to take off on Christmas Eve that year, there was no concern for his safety. He traveled to Mull once again and booked a room at the Glenforsa Hotel. With him was his girlfriend, Felicity Granger, with whom he had a Christmas meal that night, and once he was done with dinner, he suddenly decided to go on an impromptu flight. But there were a few issues that Peter should have taken into account that night. His pilot's license was no longer valid as he had neglected to renew it, and the weather was far from ideal as there was no moon, making it hard to see. And further, his plane was not of the type that would usually be chosen for a night flight. He usually wore prescription glasses while flying, but he didn't have these with him, and he'd been made aware of a storm that was rolling into the area. But he would not be dissuaded, and he borrowed 2 torches from the hotel, which he placed on the ground to act as landing lights. Felicity accompanied him to the airplane, but decided to remain on the ground, and she watched as Peter started the engine and disappeared into the night. She would have never known this was the last time that she'd see him alive. Felicity waited for some time, but Peter never returned, and eventually she started to worry that something had gone wrong, and she asked the staff at the hotel to contact the police. A search was immediately started, but for 4 months, no sign of Peter or his plane was found. But in April of that next year, a shepherd came across Peter's remains. He was found lying on top of a tree that had fallen over, and it seemed as though he'd sustained no serious injuries. The autopsy revealed that he had not suffered any life-threatening injuries, and that he'd likely not crashed his plane since there were no signs of impact to his body, and that he hadn't been at the ocean before his passing. It was determined he'd lost his life due to exposure to the elements. His plane could not be located, leaving investigators wondering whether he'd crashed, and if so, what had happened to his craft. In the quiet blackness of the evening, residents of Chicago's Bucktown neighborhood were turning in for the night. Some had already headed off to bed while others sat on their sofas, catching the last few minutes of their movies. For Jack Makercher and his girlfriend, Jordan Baranskas, it was both of these options. The pair were slumped on the couch, TV still glowing, but both of them had already nodded off before the film could finish. Unbeknownst to them, though, something sinister was lurking in the dark crevices of their house, a shadow that would go unnoticed as they drifted off. As morning drew in, the first clues that something was amiss began to reveal themselves. Jordan's purse was missing, which was uncharacteristic of her. She asked her partner if he'd seen it, but Jack hadn't. What initially began as a misplaced item became a full-blown argument between Jack and Jordan, and after several minutes of searching, they came up empty-handed. Eventually, they decided to check the home security camera, hoping the footage would reveal where she may have placed the purse, or if it had been moved somewhere else. As they ran through the footage, the couple would be left alarmed and in a state of shock. Instead of seeing an act of misplacement, they found something far more alarming. They skipped through the hours, eventually watching themselves falling asleep on the couch, and there, something alarming would emerge. At the top of the staircase, right above them, something was moving. At first, they thought it was just a shadow on the lens, but as they watched, they soon found that it was a man, a burglar who'd quietly entered their home through an unlocked door. The hooded figure loomed at the top of the stairs, his presence a chilling testament to their vulnerability. He lingered in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to act, while the couple slept below, unaware of the threat. For a harrowing 15 minutes, he just stood there, staring down at them. Remarkably, their dogs were eerily undisturbed by the intruder and remained asleep throughout the whole event. The burglar would find himself unexpectedly successful in his endeavor, snatching Jordan's purse and any valuables he could carry before slipping back into the darkness. It was only after they reviewed the footage that Jack and Jordan fully grasped the enormity of the invasion. In the days that followed, they discovered that their experience was not isolated. Bucktown had recently endured a slew of similar crimes. The community, bewildered by reports of break-ins and thefts, and it became clear that the neighborhood was under threat. The repeat offenses led to the man being dubbed the Chicago Creeper, also known as the Creeper Ghost. Fear and anxiety ripped through the neighborhood as people shared their stories and concerns. Those involved in the neighborhood watch took heightened measures, beginning to keep a closer eye on the perpetrator and exchanging tips about suspicious activity. Local media picked up the story and circulated the haunting event, only furthering the growing fear. Despite the increased awareness, the Chicago Creeper's identity remained a mystery. He continued to torment the neighborhood. Several times, the Creeper would be caught on camera, once even riding a bicycle, yet his face remained obscured by the darkness. Jack and Jordan were left traumatized by the disturbing ordeal. Every creak of the floorboards was a trigger for their anxiety. By 2015, the county of Yorkshire in the United Kingdom had already racked up quite a number of UFO and alien sightings, with at least 200 reports being made in the 20 years up until that point. Not much has surfaced in the way of actual evidence, aside from eyewitness testimonies, inexplicable residue, and the occasional poorly recorded grainy photographs. That very year, though, one of the most solid pieces of evidence of extraterrestrial existence was a peculiar video that began to circulate across social media, one that left people questioning the very fabric of their reality. The video came from the city of Salford in Greater Manchester, England, and was posted to YouTube, begging the question, do you believe in aliens? The footage appears to show something truly otherworldly. At the very beginning, a strange humanoid figure can be seen in the darkness. The pale figure with elongated head can be seen dancing around in the darkness of an unlit street. It appears unclothed, with its arms flailing haphazardly as it tiptoes in a bizarre manner. According to the observer, the being was way too tall and skinny for it to be a person. It also had wet, snake-like skin that took on a light gray tone, a feature that would ultimately lead to its identification. According to reports in the field of ufology and extraterrestrial studies, this footage appears to show the strange behavior of a gray alien, a species often considered to be a workforce that does the bidding for a different alien race. Gray alien encounters have been traced back decades, including an appearance in 1947 during the Roswell incident in New Mexico, and the infamous case of Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. The same account that posted the original video footage later claimed that the government had shut them down for posting similar videos of these supposed gray alien sightings. Although several viewers became skeptical of the authenticity of the video, they couldn't ignore the fact that numerous reports of UFO activity had been made in the area, with around 20 sightings occurring in Salford alone. Allegedly, one witness spotted 17 spaceships carrying green humanoids at the Ministry of Defense. In 2009, 2 independent sightings occurred in Stockport on the same day, one of which claimed to have seen gray amorphous objects in the sky over the railway station. The bizarre video footage of what is supposedly a gray alien serves as the only solid piece of potential evidence that the world may not be as it seems. There is a theory that has long been echoed in the wake of technology, dating back to the dawn of the first computers. It's the idea that artificial intelligence may take over one day, posing a severe threat to our future. But this theory doesn't refer to the idea that AI will one day steal our jobs, but rather that the robots and computers programmed with AI will become sentient and rise up against their makers. According to the artificial intelligence takeover hypothesis, technology will become so advanced in the future that it'll be able to take over several human tasks, ultimately allowing AI to advance and surpass human intelligence, force us into oppression, and take over the world. Though it sounds incredibly outlandish, some events serve as a testament to what the future may hold. One such event occurred in May of this year and was captured on a security camera, revealing an ominous foreshadowing. The video had been leaked from an unknown source after having been recorded in a Chinese robotics factory. Accompanying the video are titles and captions, each depicting the same ordeal: an AI robot goes berserk. Everything started as routinely as expected in the lab. The engineers were preparing to carry out a motion trial when the unexpected happened. From the hoist that dangles in the air, the AI robot suddenly begins to flail its arms around, knocking over crucial equipment and even injuring one of the workers. The tube dove out of the way, hoping to evade the robot's violence. The erratic behavior seen in the video initially led to a simple explanation of a coding error, but others believe that this incident was far more complex than that. The circulation of this terrifying footage sparked broader conversations and debate regarding the topic of humanoid robotics and artificial intelligence as a whole. The viral video brought into question the inherent dangers that may present themselves when safety is overlooked. It's often the case that when paranormal investigators are investigating a peculiar incident, they find themselves needing to fabricate much of the ordeal in an effort to make a profit and peddle the idea that there are paranormal entities haunting our world. On the rare occasion, though, away from prying eyes, there are some occurrences that are just too bizarre that there isn't any logical explanation aside from the ghostly narrative. One such event took place in Putnam County, West Virginia, and even made its way to a local news station. It was the morning of the 25th of September, 2018, when a program's executive director for the Putnam County Aging Agency discovered something strange. One of their transport vans, which was parked at the offices located at 2558 Winfield Road, seemed to have been tampered with. The doors were standing wide open, but the staff could find no evidence of vandals, thieves, or trespassers. It was initially thought that one of the staff members had mistakenly left the doors open, so they decided to check the camera footage from around the property from the evening prior. As they sifted through several hours worth of footage, they found the very moment when the doors had been opened. The jarring video was timestamped at 1:15 a.m. that morning. In black and white hues, the camera captured the moment the doors slid open, seemingly without cause. There was no one in or around the van at the time, and it was only the vehicle that appeared to be affected. The staff were left shocked by what they had seen. It looked as though the doors had jiggled slightly before sliding open from the inside, a feat that was deemed impossible due to the secured door latch. Although it was undoubtedly creepy, no one was incredibly shocked by this event. It turns out this particular office building has been the host to some paranormal activity for some time. The staff also believes that they know just where the mysterious hauntings are coming from. The older part of the building is located near the Tees Valley Road, right on the Kanawha River, where a property bears a memorial marker relating to the 1861 Battle of Scary Creek. This battle was said to have taken place on the 17th of July and lasted a harrowing 3 hours, resulting in the loss of 19 men. It's thought that those who perished during the battle may be responsible for the inexplicable ongoings, which trace back to mere weeks after the skirmish itself. For years after the event, people have reported hearing the phantom calls of the battle, as though it were replaying on a continuous loop, while others have seen whole apparitions. In the modern day, staff members believe that there's at least one Civil War-era ghost haunting the agency, as well as a woman that they think may have ties to the Ventrue or Sims family. The very stretch of road that runs past the agency has also been the location of several fatal car accidents. The Putnam County location has been subjected to quite an extensive history of torment and fatalities. It seems that none of those who met their untimely demise in the site of the agency have any intention of passing over, but have instead occupied the grounds, leaving questions, mystery, and fear in their wake. The practice of ditching unwanted things on the roadside isn't uncommon. It's a widespread issue that sees the dumping of pets that are no longer desired by their owners. The act also sees the discarding of antique items, furniture, or just trash. Most of the time, there's not much mystery that lingers around such occurrences. But in February of 2019, one such event proved to go against that and raised some unanswered questions. 59-year-old Tameside, North England resident Christine Wilkinson and her husband Kevin saw a peculiar orange box outside their home in the early days of that month. Kevin opted to investigate, hoping it was nothing nefarious. When he went to open it, though, he found that it was unusually empty. It was then, though, that he noticed something else out of the ordinary. Pecking away to its heart's content was a white chicken, right there in the Wilkinsons' garden. The couple quickly took the bird inside and gave her some food, but they were left wondering where the chicken had come from. Luckily, this question could be quickly answered with the help of their home security camera. The CCTV footage appeared to show a woman pulling up to the curb of the Wilkinson home in broad daylight, with countless witnesses circling the vicinity. She stopped her car and walked around to the trunk. The unidentified woman began moving things around in the back before finally pulling out that familiar-looking orange box. She lifted it up and gently placed it on the pavement, lingering around for several moments, during which the chicken would flap out of her confinement and hop along down the road, before making her way into the Wilkinsons' garden. The woman subsequently got back into her car and left, leaving behind a strange mystery and a hen pecking away in the snow-covered garden. Bizarrely, this was no ordinary mill-brown hen. It was a highly sought-after breed, one that looked as though it should be showcased in a chicken show. The community was left baffled by what unfolded that afternoon. Kevin believes that the owners may have been relocating, but that's no excuse for not taking the animal to a farm instead of leaving it randomly in the middle of a road on a Sunday in a high-traffic area. This strange mystery left the couple perplexed and wondering what the reason behind the dumping of the chicken was, and if it had something to do with them specifically. The woman in the video remains unidentified, along with her rationale. During the early 1990s, Chileno Sanchez was a renowned corrido musician living in Mexico. That type of music entails the telling of a story that's either based on facts from history, politics, or heroes from a bygone era, and Chileno was said to be the king of the genre. But before he achieved fame, he had a difficult time growing up. He was born in 1960 in the farming community of El Gallabo, a poor area where many people struggled to get by. But he would face an even bigger tragedy when he turned 15. In 1975, his sister went to a dance where a well-known and influential man named Chapo Perez was in attendance. It was here that the man attacked and assaulted her, and Chileno knew he couldn't let Chapo get away with this scot-free. 2 years after the attack, he learned that Chapo would be at yet another dance, and he made a plan to avenge his sister. He found the man as expected, produced a firearm, and ended his life. He was wanted by the police from that point on and had no choice but to flee, and he made his way to California. Once there, he struggled financially and turned to petty crime to support himself. This landed him in jail, but it also marked the beginning of his music career, as he had a lot of time to compose songs. Some of his fellow inmates requested that he write songs about their crimes, and he was happy to oblige. He finished his stint in prison, after which he decided to record the songs that he had written, and he sold these cassettes from the trunk of his car. Before long, he'd made a name for himself, and his music would even be played back home in Mexico. People would share the cassettes that he'd made with each other, and this resulted in an underground bootlegging scene that only catapulted Chileno to further fame. Soon, he started performing at venues that were sold out. Most of the attendees were Mexican immigrants who could relate to his songs, but on many occasions, fights would break out, and attendees would discharge firearms. What Chileno failed to take into account, though, was that some of his songs contained lyrics about criminals who didn't want any publicity, and they didn't want their exploits known by the rest of the world. Nevertheless, his success allowed him to start his own record label, and he started concentrating on his music full-time. He hired a band that would serve as his regular accompanists, and he was offered a record deal by Cintas Aquario Studio in Long Beach. He started releasing albums, and they were well received, and he could finally leave his days of struggling for money behind him. There's no doubt, though, that he made a few enemies, possibly unwittingly, and this would prove to be his undoing. In a clip that's still available on YouTube, Chileno can be seen performing at the Plaza Los Arcos nightclub in Coachella to a crowd of about 400 people. The crowd was having a great time, and the show seemed to be going off without a hitch. But about halfway through his set, something strange happened. In the clip, we can see that he'd been handed a piece of paper, and as the band starts playing the next song, he hardly seems to notice as he's intently reading the note that had been handed to him by a young man from the crowd. He would later state that he initially thought it was a song request, but as he read it, he realized someone was threatening his life. The change in his expression is obvious as he realizes what's happening, but he's able to concentrate on the music and he starts singing the next song. It would later come to light that the note instructed him to stop performing or his life would be ended. He finished the set and left the venue, but then he was approached by a group of men posing as police officers who abducted him. The next morning, Chelino was found deceased by two farmers on the outskirts of Culiacan, and it was clear that he'd been attacked by cartel members. Unsurprisingly, the culprits were never identified, and the case was never solved. But the incident ensured that Chelino would forever be remembered by those who appreciated his music. This video, which was uploaded to YouTube on the 23rd of April, 2019, shows a group of people having fun in and around a swimming pool in Luzon, an island in the Philippines, earlier that same month. Kids can be seen laughing with their friends, diving into the water and relaxing poolside, and it seems like the perfect way to spend an afternoon. But unbeknownst to everyone in that clip, disaster is about to strike. Less than 2 minutes into the video, which has no audio, the atmosphere around the pool suddenly changes when waves begin to appear in the water and the ground starts to tremble. Everyone in the water starts to swim to the edge to get out, but this is easier said than done, as the swells in the pool have gotten much bigger. As the camera pans upward, we can see trees swaying from side to side, while parents and older children rush to the pool to get the smaller children to safety. By now, water is spilling over the sides of the pools that can be seen, but everybody makes it out, and they can do nothing but wait for the tremor to subside. When the tremor finally stops, families are seen getting dressed and gathering their possessions as they start to head home to survey the damage that's been caused to their houses. It would later be reported that this was a 6.1 magnitude earthquake that struck the island, and that central Luzon was the worst affected. While the quake didn't seem like much of a threat around the pool, it had much stronger effects in other areas, and many people were left destitute. Over 3,000 people had to evacuate their neighborhoods to take shelter in evacuation centers, while close to 5,000 people were waiting to be housed in temporary shelters. 156 houses were damaged beyond repair, and more than 1,000 were partially damaged and in need of repair before they could be inhabited again. A few days later, it would be announced that 18 people had lost their lives during the quake, and 282 others had to be treated for different injuries. This YouTube video, which was uploaded 5 years ago by a channel called SCR Nathan, is yet another example of how a relaxing afternoon can turn into a nightmare in the blink of an eye. It shows a group of people, possibly tourists, getting onto a boat in Wakari, Hawaii on the 9th of December 2019. And the weather seems perfect for such an excursion, as there's only a few clouds in the sky. According to the credits, the video was recorded by someone known as Alessandro Kaufman, who joins the rest of the passengers on a boat labeled White Island Tours. Before long, we can see the island in question coming into view. But as the boat continues to approach it, passengers start to feel uneasy when they spot a plume of white smoke rising into the air above the landmass. The boat eventually reached shallow waters around White Island, and passengers, wearing hard hats, can be seen transferring the dinghies that will transport them to the island. The next piece of footage is recorded on the island, and we can see smoke rising from some areas, making it clear that there's some volcanic activity occurring. But no one seems too concerned for the time being. The last footage recorded on the island shows a few structures that collapsed long ago, and the group returning to the dinghies, not knowing that they made it off the island just in time. What follows is a terrifying series of events that leaves everyone aboard the boat in a state of panic. We can now see that the volcano has erupted as a massive plume of gray and white smoke rises from the island. Those aboard can be heard speaking in elevated tones, while one man is heard yelling, "Go, go, go," instructing the skipper to get out of the area as quickly as possible. Passengers who are leaning over the side of the boat to take photos are instructed to get inside, as the skipper was likely worried about falling rocks and other debris that would have been thrown into the air by the eruption. The next clip shows the last plume of smoke has gotten exponentially bigger, and passengers can be heard saying that they're terrified. They haven't traveled far from the island by this point, and the danger from falling debris is still very real, as one woman is heard asking, "Are we going to be okay?" and her friend replies, "I don't know." Later in the video, the group notices a helicopter from a different tour on the island, and they're dismayed to realize that it's been completely destroyed. Eventually, calm returns to the boat as the eruption settles down and smoke starts to clear. No one on board was injured, and they all made it back to land without any issues. But 22 of the 47 people who were still on the island when the eruption occurred lost their lives. Some of those who lost their lives were passengers from a cruise ship that had docked near the island, and they were simply unable to make it back to the vessel in time. In this video, the Canadian YouTuber Jason Matthew Ethier, better known to his subscribers as J Station, is spending time with a female friend. He explains that it's his last day in Texas and that they're on their way to find a new shirt for him, as he's been wearing the same one for 2 days. They then visit a restaurant in the mall, enjoy some ice cream in his car, and then the pair share a tearful goodbye. While driving alone though, Jason states that he feels God and the world are against him because he's unable to find happiness. But the truth is that J Station wasn't the most popular YouTube personality. He'd been described by others as being creepy, toxic, and manipulative, and the type of content that he uploaded, which involved him trespassing on other people's property, had caused a lot of controversy. In one video, he explained that he'd finally quit his regular job, since his YouTube channel was doing well financially, but just days later he was arrested and charged after being caught trespassing at the Bay retail store in Ottawa. On that occasion, he was fined and released. In 2020, he was dating Alexia Morano, a YouTuber who's known for her gaming and reaction videos on several platforms. But his own channel took a huge hit when he went too far in an effort to gain even more subscribers to add to the 5 million that he already had. In a video that's since been deleted from the platform, Jason can be seen crying as he informs his followers that Alexia was no longer alive, since she'd been hit by an intoxicated driver the previous evening. He then traveled to the site of the tragedy where a friend filmed him mourning at a memorial that had been set up in Alexia's honor by the side of the road. He then states that Alexia's dream was to gain 1 million subscribers to her channel, and that she nearly attained that goal when she tragically lost her life. The video gained about 800,000 views, but many people felt that something about it was strange. One user contacted the Toronto police, who informed him they had no record of anyone named Alexia Morano losing her life in an accident. Later that same week, he recorded another video in which he attempted to contact Alexia using a Ouija board, but that video and the footage in which he reveals the tragedy were quickly deleted when it came to light that Alexia was still very much alive and had not been in an accident. He quickly made another video in which he claimed that Alexia was in on the prank and that it was done in an effort to gain more subscribers. He was eventually forced to admit his deceit after Alexia's parents saw the first video and threatened to contact a news outlet. In the aftermath, Alexia chose to end their relationship, and soon after, it was announced that he was arrested after Alexia accused him of assault. Soon, he was arrested and charged with assault and assault with a weapon, to the delight of thousands of commenters who condemned the fake video. But the result of those charges is unknown. From the moment that the investigation into the disappearance of 34-year-old Justin Henry started, the police believed he was a victim of foul play, and his family was left devastated while they waited for the outcome of the case. The authorities stated they had no proof that Justin was still alive, and so they had no other option than to treat his disappearance as suspicious. They also found the circumstances surrounding his case very unusual and out of character, but they held out hope, along with Justin's family, that they were mistaken. All that was known at the time was that Henry was visiting his partner in Brixton, London, England, on the 15th of October 2023, and that after he left, he visited a McDonald's drive-thru at around 9:50 p.m., as is seen on CCTV footage that's been uploaded to YouTube. The McDonald's is located on London Road in Croydon, and later that same night, his silver Mercedes E-Class was seen being driven to Crystal Palace, but the police were certain that someone else was behind the wheel. Then, on the 6th of November, investigators found a red Nissan Almera on Dale Road in Purley, and when it was searched the next day, Justin was found deceased in the trunk. It would then be established that Henry drove his car to Wadden New Road, and after the vehicle remained there for 2 hours, it was driven to Crystal Palace. When Justin's family was shown images from CCTV cameras showing his car being driven, they were unable to see the driver's face, but remained adamant that the man operating the vehicle was not Justin. They then reached out to the public, asking for anyone with information about what happened that night to come forward, so that the culprit could be tracked down and arrested. They also described Justin as a happy person who wouldn't hurt a fly, making the attack all the more abhorrent. The CCTV footage from the McDonald's drive-thru was also made available to the public in hopes that it would jog someone's memory, but it remains unknown whether anyone came forward with relevant information. Then, on the 24th of October, just more than a week after Justin disappeared, the authorities announced that they'd made an arrest, and that 30-year-old Louis Benjamin was in custody. He tried to flee and get rid of his phone when approached by officers, but was unable to do so. This was quickly followed by the arrest of 29-year-old Jamal Ali Richards, likely because Benjamin supplied his name to the police. They stood trial at the Woolwich Crown Court on the 11th of September, and both were found guilty of ending Justin's life. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.